Hi, everyone. My name's Casey Barnes. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm the Director of External Engagement for the Wharton MBA program. I'm here with my colleague, Colleen France. She's the Senior Associate Director and MBA Career Advisor for our Career Management Department. I want to thank Colleen for taking the time to do this new webinar with us. This is part of our what we call ASN Discovery Series. If any of you have taken part in our webinars or general webinars, you'll know that ASN, or the Advising Support Network, is a really unique and amazing part of the Wharton entity and something that sets the Wharton MBA experience apart from all the other elite institutions. So what we're doing here is just a discovery series. This is our second of 4. And Colleen, if you could go to the next slide for me. So as you know, and again, if you have seen our webinar before, I'll just cover it quickly. And if you haven't, that's wonderful. We're glad you joined us. But the ASN, we use a lot of acronyms. The Advising Support Network, or ASN, is really a team. We call them their board of advisors. And this covers 4 departments at Wharton that really help you individualize your experience. And so it covers 4 areas. And Colleen, there's some transitions, if you could click them for me. So we have student life, career management, leadership, and academics. And last week, we actually had Megan Gaddy, who is in charge of our student life. This week, we have Colleen France, who will speak shortly. And then we'll have 2 more webinars the next 2 Wednesdays for leadership and our academics. And we hope you'll be able to join in here. So I'm going to turn it over to Colleen. She is the resident expert and just absolutely amazing. I always love listening to her because I learn something every time we chat. So Colleen, if you want to take it away.
Great, thanks, Casey. And thank you all for being here today. I hope this is an informative and pretty interactive workshop. And so we'll leave a good amount of time for questions. I hope that you brought some with you or come up with some as I flip through the slides here, outlining how we work as an office, how we work with you as a student, and some tips that you can be thinking about before embarking on your MBA journey. If you'll just excuse me for 1 second, I'm going to shut this window here because as luck would have it, there's a new roof being installed across the street from me, and I just realized I left my window open. So the joys of working from home, right? I either feel like every time I get on a screen, there's a trash truck, a Amazon truck backing up, or today, as luck would have it, a new roof being installed. It's not mine, though, unfortunately. But so anyway, as Casey said, I'm part of the Advising Support Network at Wharton. I've been on the team, the ASN team, for about 3.5 years, co-chaired it for the past 2.5 years, and will continue in that role with a few of my colleagues across the division for this next upcoming academic year. I serve as a Senior Associate Director and Career Advisor in the MBA Career Management Office, otherwise known as MBA CM. And I have been with the team since 2017. I've actually been at Penn and Wharton since 2010. I sat in Casey's office for a while. I was the director of our Carey JD MBA program. And so I came in 2010, essentially designed the program, got it launched, the 3-year JD MBA. And in 2016, helped raise a gift for the program, and then decided that I would like to be a little bit more student facing. And so moved over to career management from the JD MBA. But so in my role as the JD MBA program director, I served on the admissions committees at both Penn Law and Wharton. I worked really closely with each school's career management offices, as well as academic offices, leadership, and student services. And so it was sort of the running the gamut of a program. Over at career management, though, I specifically cover a few industries. I cover real estate, which is a pretty unique program at Wharton. I cover general management and leadership development programs, which cross industries and sectors. Anybody looking to do essentially a leadership development program, which are typically 2-year rotational programs post-MBA or internal strategy, I work with those students. I also work with our students who are interested in roles in human capital. That has been a new industry of focus for us in the office. It's really exciting. We have students this summer going to Apple and Google and Amazon and American Express, VMware, a variety of roles. It's just a really sort of interesting career journey for an MBA. And then lastly, I cover travel and hospitality, which hopefully will be coming back in this upcoming cycle. It's been a bit put on pause this year, as you can imagine. But so I'll get into how our office works with students, but just know that if you're interested in any of those industries and sectors, you would be working with me as your career advisor. So we work with students in a variety of ways, and you'll be surprised to hear me say this, that getting an actual job, internship, et cetera, is kind of the easy part, right? The journey is not going to be easy to get it, but you're coming in, you're a Wharton MBA student, like our placement numbers speak for themselves, about 99% placement. I think it's about 100% of students seeking internships received one. Even in a volatile year like last year, we had extremely high placement. We ended up having a number of new employers engaging on campus this fall. We had an incredibly robust recruiting season. I don't know the actual numbers, but I think it was actually higher, the number of events and coffee chats and information sessions, than we did the previous year. You can imagine that that availability and the ability of companies to be able to put on an event virtually rather than have to make their way to Philadelphia and hope that students come to a room and engage with their employer team, the barrier is much low when you're doing it virtually. And so the feedback that we received from a virtual season was pretty good. You know, students enjoyed being able to pop around at different events, maybe attend more than they would have in a normal season and explore more opportunities. But so getting a job, as I said, is just sort of one piece of it. What we look to do as an office is to really coach you through a decision-making process about who are you? What do you want to get out of your MBA? Where do you want to go from here? And where do you see your long-term career goals? And so some of the first interactions that you'll have with our office are the summer prior to enroll or to coming to Wharton for preterm, where each industry advisor gives a session on, you know, what's happening in their industry. What are some of the best practices for recruiting? What are some of the trends happening, not just in the recruiting in the industry, but in the actual industry? You can imagine technology sector has been on the uprise. You can imagine there was a lot of disruption, for instance, last year in real estate. And so we sort of give a lay of the landscape early in the summer, so that way you as a student can sort of think, you know, maybe I want to try out private equity. You might go to the private equity session and think, maybe I don't want to try out private equity, and I think that consulting might be for me. Or it feels like the whole class is doing consulting and really I want to do retail. Well, guess what? The whole class is not doing consulting. It just might sometimes feel like that because there is a large percentage. And the recruiting all takes place in a very quick amount of time, essentially. And so we do those sessions. You then go through an exercise called Career Fit, Career Leader, where you take an online assessment that is designed specifically for MBA students. And so the assessment is not going to spit out that you should become a medical doctor. It's not designed that way. But it gives you an idea of what are your strengths and weaknesses, what are your drivers, what are your competencies, and what are some of your goals. You then work really closely with two folks in our office, Dr. Sam Jones, who is the director of our strategic initiatives, who has his doctorate in education leadership from Penn. But so he has designed this program with his partner, Jessica Katz, who also serves as our undecided advisor, to help you think about how do you design a career path for yourself that keeps in mind your long-term calling and mission. We've run a lot of research and data in our office around the importance in having a calling and a mission and how it makes you more satisfied in your job search, more satisfied in your initial post-MBA job, and then longer term in your career. It makes you more satisfied, happier in the workplace. It tends to have higher salary data than if you don't have a calling and a mission. And so again, it's really easy to say like, hey, I would like to get a job at XYZ company this summer. What are the steps to get there? And thinking about, I would like to get a job at XYZ company this summer because long-term, my career goal is to do this, and tying those pieces together. And so we're going to teach you tactical skills to go through a job seeking process that will enable you to hone those skill sets throughout your entire career. We also, the other side of our team, which is called our EE team, Employer Engagement. Casey was not kidding when everything at Wharton has an acronym, so I'm going to remind myself to fill you in on what those are. But our EE team, Employer Engagement, is run by a team of what we call RMs, relationship managers, who are responsible for getting all of these thousands and thousands of jobs into our system, making sure that we have the appropriate contacts at each company, making sure that we are staying in touch with the alumni at these companies, making sure that we're having an eye on new industries, right? I mentioned human capital, fintech, the future of cities, autonomous vehicles, all of these industries that may not have even not existed a few years ago, but that were not top of mind for MBA hiring. And so our employer engagement team is constantly thinking about what are the hot new companies? How do we engage with them? How do we make sure that they're thinking about hiring Wharton talent? And so their job is extremely important in terms of marketing, business development, and then the logistical coordination of then bringing all of that energy to campus. I do see a few things in the chat, so I'm going to take a second to pause to see if they're relevant to this slide. And again, go ahead and put things in the chat. And so some of these I'm going to take for, okay, right, I just saw the first question. I'm going to save that one for the end, and we can get into the OPT just because it's a bit nuanced, and so I'm happy to share that. But let's just keep moving here. And whoops, what did I just do? Hold on one second. Bear with me. There we are. Okay, so how do we support your job search? And so again, as I mentioned, you're going to come in and do some self-assessment platforms. You'll have what's called your first engagement with an industry advisor is going to be what's called your preterm advising session. You can choose the advisor that you meet with. As I mentioned through our calling and mission work, we do have an advisor who works with our undecided students. And so you might come in and say, I know the skills that I want to build, but I don't know what industry that looks like, or I actually don't know what skills I want to build. I'm a full career switcher. I came to Wharton because I want to have a transformative experience. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. And guess what? That's fine. That's completely fine. It's expected. You should be coming in looking to have a transformative experience. I feel like if we went back and read your admissions essays on graduation day, we might have a little chuckle at how much you have learned and grown and changed your mind over the course of 2 years. And that's completely fine. And so you might be working with Jess as an undecided student, and she is a former executive coach and a leadership coach, and she's able to give you some assessments to help you sort of think about what are your goals, what is your calling, what sort of tactical skills do you need to build to get there. Or you might come in and say, hey, I'm a real estate person. I want to do real estate development. I used to do real estate private equity. I want to change the landscape of insert up and coming city here. And so you would come into Wharton working directly with me. I would put you in touch with our research center on real estate. I would connect you to some students and some alums and give you the skills to start building before you're even starting a recruiting journey. And so that usually takes place through preterm and the first quarter, where employers are not coming to campus. We're sort of holding them off to give you a sense and a chance to do some self-reflection and to think about what your goals are before the wining and dining begins, before the networking, before the 5 events per day, essentially. Then we start thinking about how does your internship path lead to your full-time path? You want to do something over the summer just because it's cool, right? And so I have a student who's going to consulting full-time, but tried out a startup last summer because what a great opportunity to hit pause in a career path that he already knew was sort of designed for him, that he came into Wharton knowing that he was going back to his consulting firm, and to try out a startup over the summer. You might try an industry over the summer and then decide that it's not for you. And so how do you set yourself up as a career switcher mid MBA? And so these are all strategies that are employed through working with both your career advisor, your peers, the professional clubs, and then your entire network of alumni. Now, how does the ASN come into that? So let's again, and I'm the real estate advisor, I'm going to keep using real estate as an example. So let's just talk about a typical real estate student who is a career switcher, which, by the way, I think our numbers this year, 72% of our students who are going into real estate internships are career switchers, and so definitely doable. Most industries are open to career switchers. Some are less so, but let's just take a student who's interested in switching into real estate. So I might sit down with that student and help them draw out a career path. I then might send them over to my colleague in the academics office to sit down to say, hey, you studied social sciences in undergrad, and so you're going to need a little bit more energy and attention into your quant classes first semester. You might want to hold off on taking a real estate class until second semester. And the person would work with their academic advisor to look at the real estate course offerings, to look at the other skills that they need to build, maybe in finance, maybe in project management, and then be able to design their curriculum for the 2 years, knowing that they've just come from, and I use the word office, right? Even though I'm sitting in my attic, but they've just come from my office, gone over to the academics office, and then thought, okay, what else can I put on my resume that has nothing before I got to Wharton in real estate and turn it more into a real estate resume? They then might think, what kind of offerings does Student Life have, and join the real estate club, take on a leadership role. They might go over to McNulty Leadership Program and think, hey, I need to learn as a real estate professional to hear the word no a lot, right? I need to learn how to be entrepreneurial minded. And so they might take some programs on public speaking, on getting to yes, on our P3 program, Passion, Principle, and Purpose. They might get a executive coach to help them think through their long-term goals. And so we don't think that any one of our offices operates in a vacuum. And as an ASN, we are thinking holistically about each student, just as you as a student are thinking holistically about your MBA experience. And so the career management team is helping you through all of this, the iteration of getting from A to B, and then maybe doing it a few times over to get it right. We have a platform called MAP. It's called My Action Plan. It's an interactive website that has AI functionality, so machine learning, very cool. And based on some inputs that you put into the system, it then helps you design your career search coming forward. Again, sort of working with your advisor, working with your peer team. And it's a website that it's somewhat in beta stage. We've created a few years ago, and the more data that it gets into it, the smarter the system is. And so, by the time you all are students, it will be much smarter than it even is today. Okay, so, yep, okay, so yeah, not open to career switchers. And so I won't say not open, but I will say, just for example, PE and VC are pretty tough to switch into. If you didn't come from, say, investment banking into PE, or PE back into PE, it's a bit tough to pivot. That said, it can be done. And here are some of the skills that you would build, right? Your finance skills, maybe do an in-semester internship at a small shop to prove that your chops are there in finance. Building out your network really early on, using a headhunter to help you alongside our PE advisor, which our PE advisor worked in private equity as well as banking for his entire career, moving over to Wharton. So I won't say that it's not available. I will just say that it's a little bit harder as a career switch. Now, let's go back up a little bit. Let me just start at the top of these. Great. Are these advisors available to students as soon as they're admitted? So no. Who you should be talking to once you're admitted are admissions fellows. And so our admissions fellows are actually going through an incredibly robust training right now to learn the ins and outs of speaking to admitted students as well as prospective students and getting a brain dump of everything they need to know about the school. Now, why don't advisors in our office talk to admitted students? We start talking to admitted students in about July when we have our kickoff industry talks. And then again, the month of August, we spend doing preterm advising. And so the reason why is because right now we have the class of 2021 that we are closing out the books on, getting them jobs. We are also finalizing all of our class of 2022 internships. And then we spend typically the months of May, June, and July doing company outreach and then getting ready for the new class to come in. And so 2 classes are enough to kind of keep a hold of. 3 classes is almost impossible logistically. The other thing is that you you should be in an exploration phase before talking to an advisor, right? And so most of our students spend their summer, which I believe that the access is kicked on June 1, in MAP, reading through action plans, reading through the resources for each industry, and then coming to your first advising appointment or coming to an industry brief, being able to ask, sort of good informed questions. And so, so that's sort of the logistics of how we work. Great. And so let's see, I'm going to go to another question here. Taking on multiple conversations and majors in order to prepare for their post-MBA career, right? And so the academics team, who will be presenting, I believe it's in 2 weeks, will be able to talk more about the majors at Wharton. What I will say, though, just quickly on this subject, is that majors at Wharton, it's not like an undergrad where it dictates like such a huge percentage of your experience. And so the majors at Wharton, it's a 19 credit unit, and let's just say each class is worth either a half a credit or a full credit, 19 credit units. It's usually about 6 credits for your major. So it's absolutely doable to double major. We have a lot of people who will double major in business analytics and finance, or for myself, my own students, real estate and finance. There are classes that cross over. There are some students who don't figure out their major until sitting down and looking at their transcript and saying, oh, I might need only one more class for this. Sounds good. I think I will go from there. And so it's definitely something that you start to think about in preterm. You also have a preterm advising appointment with your academic advisor to start to think about that. And so let me go up a little bit, and then I'm going to shelf the questions for a minute, and we'll come back to them. Somebody coming from a family business background. Yeah, so we have both a startup and entrepreneurship advisor who used to work really closely with, I believe it was called at Wharton, the SBFC, the Small Business and Development Center. I'm going to completely fudge that acronym, apologies. But yes, and so across industries, so it would really guide you to work with what industry your family business in is how you would structure it. And then there are also resources throughout the division for small family businesses. So let's keep moving here, and I'm going to come back to the questions. All right, and so how do we work with you, right? And so again, we're going to bring in, and I'm going to talk a bit about this now. We're going to bring in, what are your goals? What was your experience before Wharton? I saw we had somebody say, I want to pivot into PE as a military career switcher, which I will say PE and banking and consulting all look favorably upon military candidates. But so what are, did you come from consulting and maybe you worked on some pretty cool CPG projects and now you want to move into CPG as a brand manager rather than a strategy person? So you're going to think more about a functional based career search than an industry based one, meaning that you already know the industry that you're looking to go into. And so as a strategy consultant, how do you start to build skills in brand management? And I'll tell you, it's going to be through coursework, right? The marketing coursework, maybe looking at the Wharton Customer Analytics Initiative, at the Wharton Retail Baker Center, right? And developing those functional skills to be able to make that move. Now, a big deal in looking for a post-MBA job is your risk profile. So I'm going to raise my hand and let you know that I have an extremely limited risk profile. I spent my first 10, 11 years in my career working in the legal field at law firm in Philadelphia, and then moved over to higher ed. So like not exactly jumping out of airplanes here, right? And so I'm a calculated person, right? I like safety things and control, okay? You might not look like that at all. You might say like, I can't wait to come to Wharton and go down that Antarctica track and be a leadership, venture fellow. And I want to go into VC, right? Now, if you come into Wharton and tell me that you too are like me with an extremely limited risk profile and that your career choice is venture capital, we might have to have a very serious conversation around the mismatch there, right? And so the risk profile is a big part of your career search. And so again, I'm going to come back to use my tried and true real estate example. It's about a mix. right? And so I would say in terms of the internship months where your students are getting their internships, if you're doing consulting, you're probably going to get your internship offer and have your entire process closed out in January. If you're a real estate student, you're going to be recruiting through March. You might go on spring break or you might not go on spring break because you're in New York, still having coffee chats and informational meetings with companies, building relationships. And there might not even be a job posting in real estate. And you meet somebody at a development shop, and next thing you know, you walk out of that meeting with an offer, which happens all the time. And so you're going to measure your risk profile essentially to help you design your job search. Now, that said, you could have a limited risk profile and build it out a little bit, right? Or vice versa. You could be a huge risk taker, but you just want to have, sort of a more structured internship or job, and that's completely fine. But it's all about, right, these learnings. Who are you? What motivates you? What drives you? What is your risk profile? And how can that translate into what your job search may look like? So we talk about recruiting as two strategies. And so a lot of it, which we have found through just running tons of student data, is a mix and blend of the two. And so there is a mature recruiting process, which I'll say, like, let's go back 5-10 years ago. Most of our recruiting happened in this mature bucket, where you would see, and this is across MBA programs, right? Early 2000s, you would see mid 2000, whatever, you would see tons of students going into banking and consulting and CPG and just like way more traditional. And then we've started to see a shift in the MBA profile, right? And so I remember being on the admissions team and going to, events across the globe, and students coming up to me saying, I'm applying to Wharton as a non-traditional candidate. And I'm like, yeah, try me, okay? Because unless you were running some sort of, I don't know, like I'm just gonna make it up, like an ant farm, like turns out you being an English major applying to business school is not so underrepresented or so diverse as you may think it is, right? I think our numbers shake out around somewhere 40% of our students are social science majors. 8% of our students are coming from investment banking into the class. I think the number of students coming from public policy, military is actually greater than IB. And so, so it turns out you're not that non-traditional, right? And so the recruiting process and the evolution of the recruiting process has followed suit, where 70+% of our students are going to companies for their internship that are only hiring one Wharton MBA. And so where there might be, 10 people in the class at, say, American Express in their finance division, they're only hiring one Wharton MBA. Whereas, it might have used to look like, oh, all of my friends are going to Deloitte this summer or wherever it might be. And so the way that we talk about recruiting in our office is in these two buckets. And again, most of them are going to kind of merge in the middle and be a blend of the two. But so I'll just give a few examples of the mature process. CPG, investment banking, and consulting come to mind, where those companies are coming to campus in October. They're going to do an info session, maybe have a little networking event, invite you to a coffee chat. You might paint some pottery, I don't know, the recruiting events. And then there's going to be an application deadline with a recruiting contact, requirements of what you need to submit an application. And then within, say, 2 weeks, you will know, do you have an interview or not? If you have an interview, you'll know the exact date of the interview. And you will have known that since August because it's on our calendar. And then there's a callback and there's a early offer date. You would then get an offer on that date. You then have 3 weeks to decide from the date of written offer, and your process is closed out. There are no tricks. There's a lot of transparency. There's just a very clear path to choose, right? So let's flip the switch on that and say that you are looking to go into entrepreneurship or a startup as a joiner rather than a founder. You might be talking to 50 different startups just for, your own educational purposes, and not have an internship lined up until May, right? You might go to a company, a startup, who does not have a job description, who doesn't have a job on their board, who doesn't even have a board at this point, depending on how early stage they are. And you might network your way into that company to be able to find your, either internship or post MBA job. And so I believe that if you as a student, even if you're doing mature recruiting, if you build out the enterprise skill sets, these will serve you in your career. Because once you leave Wharton, right, and we usually have about half the class telling us, yes, I did some sort of formal mature recruiting in undergrad, right? Like I went to the career fair and I had an interview, I got a call back and then I got a job. Or nope, I did it all on my own, or a mix of each. It comes out to like 50-50, I did it on my own versus I did it through formalized channels. And so our class looks a little bit more like 60-40 on the enterprise side, where only about 40% of our students are getting their internship offers through what we call FRP, focused recruiting. That's the companies coming to campus, using our career suite, and then having a process from there. And so I think, though, if you are approaching a mature process with some enterprise skills, right, if you look at these, like be prepared for multi-forms of networking, proactive, right, like sustain your efforts throughout the year. These are all skills that will serve you as you go throughout your career search. So again, I had mentioned earlier on that we spend a lot of our time building relationships with companies. Ones on here that, obviously are all companies that you have heard of, and then maybe some smaller companies or some new companies. I'll give an example in our leadership development programs. A new company that we have, two new companies that we've engaged with this year are Hearst Financial, who have a conglomerate of companies under them. And so in their leadership program, students are able to go through a number of their holding companies to put together their LDP. Another new company for us in leadership development is in the finance sector, is M&T Bank, which is doing, Capital One, which is doing a lot of cool stuff in the fintech space. And so we have a number of students going there this summer, whereas in the past few years, we might have gotten one student and had like a very limited relationship. And so we're constantly building out new relationships with cool companies, right? Like you see Hulu on here, Airbnb. I know that Chewy is an exciting company for a lot of students. And so really, that comes down a lot to the power of the alumni network. It's the largest MBA alumni network across the globe. You reaching out to alums using your Wharton email address, I will put the percentage at about 90 in which you will receive a response, which if any of you have sent LinkedIn messages, right, the response rate on there, I think hovers around 20 to 30% response rate when you're cold emailing people. But I'll tell you, your Wharton email address goes a long way. And you can use our alumni database to go through and run searches either by industry, location, by company, and just reach out to somebody saying, hey, I'm looking at this job on your board and I know that you're not in that division, but I would love to talk to you to get your advice around, what's it like to work at Tesla, right? What's the company culture like? What are some recruiting tips that you might have for me? And you'd be surprised at the response that you'll get of alums who remember being in your shoes and want to help you as a career seeker. In a normal year, right, the fun part of our job is usually in the summer when our team disperses across the country and the globe to go visit companies. This summer, right, I will be doing it from the luxury of my attic where I've been sitting for the past year. But that said, right, the relationship management that we have with companies and the ability for if a student concerns comes up and maybe the student is not comfortable asking the companies, they don't want to, lend themselves to any exposure. I might call the company and say, hey, I'm asking on behalf of a few students or a student, like what would be the reaction from, insert company here if this student were to ask to move their internship, by a week, right? And so it's really nice to have those relationships with companies and be trusted partners. And so to give an example for LDPs, leadership development programs, a few years ago, we were on the phone with Madison Square Garden, who has a pretty robust LDP, and they were building it. It was new, and so they contacted their business school partners. Hey, where do students go for LDPs? What are some really good ones? What are best practices? How do we engage with these students? And so it's really nice to be thought partners with our representative companies in order to best serve our students, which in this case would be, you guys. All right, let us again, the two sides of the office. And so I'll talk a little bit about how each industry team is comprised. Most of our industry advisors we have a team of full-time as well as some part-time advisors. Most of our industry advisors come from the industries in which they advise for. And so quick examples, our investment banking advisor was the director of recruitment for Goldman Sachs for a number of years before coming over to Wharton. Our consulting advisor was at Deloitte. As I mentioned, our PE advisor was worked in banking and PE in London prior to coming to Wharton. And so you're going to get advice that is expert, that's actionable, and that ties into your experience and your goals as an MBA student. On the on the employer engagement side, again, I had mentioned all of the things that team does. And so I'm lucky enough to work with one relationship manager across my industries. And so we are, I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of Slack calls that we have per day of just like, hey, like, let me bounce this idea off of you, or I'm hearing from a student who has a very specific search in real estate. What are you seeing on the employer side? And so it becomes a really robust relationship between the student-facing advisor and the employer-facing representative to serve you as a student, as a constituent, in order to help you achieve your career goals. All right, so we know that I wrap up today. Meg Gowdy was last week. These events are recorded, and then you'll have the joy of seeing two of my colleagues and co-chairs on the committee, Gwendolyn and Lisa, in the next 2 weeks. And so Gwendolyn is a fantastic Wharton resource. She was a leadership fellow when she was a Wharton MBA student, and then recently came back and joined the team as a senior director in McNulty. And Lisa and I think, joined the ranks for pretty deep tenure at Wharton, having both spent over a decade here. So let's come back into our questions here, and feel free to continue to put them in the chat as we go. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. Let me just make sure there's not another. Right, and so you guys should have all of these things. Again, this session is recorded. If you register for the session, then you obviously should have the website handles, etc. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. As I mentioned earlier, advisors don't start talking to students really until, essentially it's almost go time that you're here. But if you do have a specific question for me, I'm happy to be in touch. Again, I was on the admissions committee, 7 years, and I think I still do a good amount of work with them and really enjoy the work. Can't wait till we get to be doing it in person again. I cannot share that enough with you. So let me go ahead and stop my share here, and let's go through some of these questions. All right, excellent. Let me just go into the chat and okay, so let me scroll up. I'm going to see which ones I missed from the top here. And apologies as I do this somewhat cumbersome process. How do I move the chat out? Okay, so
Colleen, if there's any admissions questions you need me to help with, just let me know. But I know
okay.
You're incredibly versed in admissions.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay. Let's see, strategy. I was wanting to speak to Wharton's nonprofit career support. Yep, excellent question. And so we have so at Wharton, we quantify this as social impact, right? And so because you could have an interest in going to a for-profit company, but working in corporate and social responsibility, you could go be working for a startup that would be social impact, but not necessarily nonprofit. And so we have a dedicated advisor who works with our students with social impact. She also is in extremely close contact with Sandy Hunt, who's our executive director of the Social Impact Initiative, as well as Professor Catherine Klein. And so there's but you're never going to find anything at Wharton that happens in a vacuum, right? I work really closely with the Peter Capelli, who runs the Human Resources Management Center at Wharton, as well as Professor Oscar Nakahara, who's involved in the Zell-Lurie Real Estate Center. And so you're always going to find almost of how can my career advisor make connections for me? Who do they know in the industry? Who do they know at Wharton? What classes should I be taking? What centers should I be drawing on? Are there, funding opportunities if I want to work in nonprofit social impacts session? And so, yes, absolutely. You're going to be supported in the space in nonprofits. and full-time for the education sector, right? And so we have a lot of students I know coming from, say, education pioneers. We also have both a joint degree as well as a certificate program with the Graduate School of Education, which is literally right next door to Wharton, to Huntsman Hall, where you can take 4 classes outside of the Wharton MBA curriculum that will count towards your MBA and add on a certificate in education policy, or maybe you want to do a master's in education leadership, and then either go work in maybe running a charter school, or again, in education pioneers, in ed tech tends to be pretty popular amongst our students, or in building out educational systems as part of a greater sort of social impact initiative at a company. So absolutely, there's a lot of energy there, and we're seeing more and more student interest in the education schools. It's called GSE, Graduate School of Education, at Penn. Okay. So so again, I'm coming back to the question on interested in career pivot to finance, PEVC. How can the ASN support? Again, similarly to the way that I discussed this real estate student, that, you know, transitioning into finance, you're going to want to go heavy on the quant classes. You're going to want to build out your story, right? And so to do in a lot of these career journeys, you need a really strong pitch. How do you get across who you are and why someone should hire you in about the course of 2 minutes? And you might want to go over to leadership and take some public speaking classes or programs, et cetera. Banks, PE, et cetera, really love leadership, you know, students who take on leadership opportunities. So going into student life, thinking about how can you become a student leader, right? Maybe be a co-president of the class or something like that. I will say that the difference in career management and ASN, how you'll work with students. And so our program is designed in a 4-cluster system in which there are 4 clusters of insert, I'm just going to say 220 students here. Each cluster has 3 cohorts of about 70 to 80 students, and then each cohort has a number of learning teams of about 5 to 6 students. And so when you come on cluster 3, we're the bees. Every cluster has a mascot. And if you come into cluster 3, your student life advisor will be assigned to you. Your academic advisor will be assigned to you. But in career management, because we are industry aligned, you might be a career seeker in investment banking. But you just have a few quick questions about, like, hey, how do I make an appointment with Sunshine, who's our advisor? How do I begin to build out some skills? I don't really need an advising appointment yet. And then you might come to me and consider me almost like a gatekeeper, of somebody who can just give you some generalized information about our office and point you in the right direction of which advisor you should be working for your industry search, industry specific search. Great question. Let's just keep going down the line here. Let's see, and you already know the career path. We'll be interested in pre-MBA internships. So our office does not work with students in terms of pre-MBA internships, meaning that we don't sort of partner with companies to fulfill pre-MBA internship postings. Now, that said, there are several programs that do offer pre-MBA internships. And what I will say about that is the only thing you're going to want to be careful about is, are you coming out of that pre-MBA internship with an offer that you may have signed? Maybe it comes with some financial incentives. Prior to getting to your MBA is, to me, a little bit of a risk. Only if you're looking, again, to have a transformative experience. And let's say you sign on with insert company here in financial services. You get to Wharton and you join the tech club and you start going to our Tech Tuesday talks and you know, get sort of lore, and you do semester in San Francisco and you think, you know what, like, I want to be in Palo Alto. I want to work for big tech. And you've already signed an offer with a company that you did prior to your MBA. And so that would be one risk. If you're doing it for pure exploration, or most of our companies, I'll use a partner organization of ours, MLT. If you're doing a pre-MBA internship or early recruiting through, say, MLT or something, our companies will typically honor our early deadline for holding that offer open. So I would say any pre-MBA internships that you're doing, just be careful, like, kind of what you're signing. But these are a great way. A lot of students who are in the investment management or hedge fund space as career switchers, a lot of those students will come in and do pre-MBA internships. And so what you can use is just essentially some of our general resources that are or just using job boards. But again, think about how you want to spend your last summer prior to coming to an MBA program, because once preterm hits, right, we overuse the term drinking from the fire hose, but I think it's pretty apt here that it's a busy program. Okay, let's see here. Is it difficult to pivot into marketing from engineering, right? And so, I'm not going to answer that as a yes or no. I'm going to say it's going to take skills to build, right? So think about some of the functional skills as an engineer that you have that translate into marketing. And so what I would say is project management, eye for detail, understanding functionally how things work. And so what's the difference if, I'll just use civil engineering, right? If you're building a highway or building a marketing campaign, there are a lot of, crossover skills. And you would come to Wharton, again, the coursework, the club, case competitions, right? And just build yourself out. So people tend to come to an MBA program to have a transformative experience and to build out skills over the course of 2 years in order to pivot into a new career. In-semester internship opportunities. So these are, again, interested in PEVC, et cetera. These are, again, typically, so a lot of times jobs will come through the clubs for in-semester internships. And so each club essentially has a weekly newsletter, and they might have like part-time postings. I will say that it's in a typical year, it's tough to do an in-semester internship because you're so busy, right? So there are no classes on Fridays, but there are career treks a lot of Fridays. There's case competitions, there's industry conferences, there's student-led conferences. Now, in this disrupted COVID year, we are seeing a lot more students do part-time internships virtually. And so maybe this is something that once we go back to normal or in person, you could still maintain a level of doing project-based work virtually that would not cut into, essentially your MBA experience. So it's going to be a mix essentially of you seeking it out yourself essentially, and then seeing what sort of comes in. West Coast opportunities. How do you gain advantage against, our friends out West? We'll point to Berkeley and Stanford. Semester in San Francisco, right? And so Wharton SF, Wharton West is literally one of my favorite places on earth. It is on the Embarcadero. It is in the Hills Brother Plaza. So you kind of walk over there and it's just so beautiful. The campus is awesome. I will say the food there is great. Our WEMBAs, what we call them, exec MBAs, are out in SF or Philly. And so you could do your semester in San Francisco, do a entrepreneurship and residence program, do your summer internship on the West Coast, and sort of build out your profile. Again, back in say like 2010, I think I like knew all of our SF alums that had graduated within the last 3 years that I always knew I could like call on. The number of students that we have going to SF almost rivals New York, right? And so it is a big network out there. And our branding is great, right? Like you walk around FIDI and SF and like you're going to see the Wharton banners everywhere. And so it's definitely a community of folks out there. Okay, so let's see, human capital. What were some of the challenges? What are some new and exciting opportunities? So within human capital, I say some of the challenges are companies thinking about Wharton as a school for human capital. So I'll just put it out there, like Ross is a great human capital program, like tons of students go to Ross to be in this space. It's a great feeder for like Deloitte human capital or McKinsey people, et cetera. And so for us, it's been a lot of business development, working with companies to say like, hey, we have this subset of students who are interested in the space. They're looking at either going to companies to do people analytics or change management, the future of work, right, which is so top of mind right now, diversity and inclusion initiatives. I have a student who is working for the 15% pledge. I have another student who was at Deloitte Human Capital prior to her MBA and then launched her own DE&I consulting firm when she graduated last year. And so it's really just building out those relationships with companies, I think has been a bit of a challenge. And then also looking at certain functional areas that are more functions than they are industries, right? So when I mentioned human capital earlier, we have folks going to say like American Express versus Google, two totally different industries, totally different approaches to people at work, but both within the human capital function. And so, students are only around for 2 years, but what we do is we take all of these great student ideas, we work really closely with professional clubs, and then we institutionalize them, right? And so while you're long gone, we're still building out those relationships and making our programs better. Great, let me keep going down. Specific question on the career stats, no for functions roles. And so the really specific data, we have a number of Power BI platforms within MAP. And so you would get access to that, like I said, the June 1 prior to preterm starting in mid-August, to be able to go through all of the data, all the stats, all the resources, inform yourself like near to, let's just say 70%, and then come in ready to work with your career advisor to be able to implement your recruiting plan going forward. And so, so that's been pretty exciting to be able to use data in such an important and productive way. Let me keep moving down here. See, what does career support look like after graduation? Excellent question. And so we sort of never go away. Your login to our system looks different because you will then receive, after you graduate, we switch you over in our system in August, where you're using your what's called a lifelong Wharton email address to gain access to our system. And so the job board is still available. What yours would look like as an alum would be jobs that are posted for alumni, right? So like you're not going to be filtering through a bunch of internships, or if it's September, looking at jobs that don't start until the following July, which is what our second year MBAs are doing. And so one, you'll have access to our resources. And then two, we have an incredible and robust alumni advising team led by an advisor who was a career management advisor for years before taking the helm for Alumni Advising, just because of so much interest in connecting back to Wharton for our services, rather than say, maybe like hiring a career coach or working with a headhunter. And so her team has 4 to 5 advisors. You as an alum, you would make an appointment the same way that you would as if you were a student. You would just kind of go onto our system, make an advising appointment, and they focus on different areas. And so there's going to be somebody for early career folks, career switchers, career re-enterers, right? And so thinking about taking a leave or taking a secondment and then going back into the career force that you're looking at. And so you're absolutely supported throughout your career, right? It's part of Wharton's overall lifelong learning initiative, which comes in the form of education and careers and leadership development, and sort of, you leave Wharton and your journey essentially, I mean, not to sound cheesy, is just beginning, right? And so we're going to support you along the way. The other really great thing in that sense is going to be the alumni clubs across the globe. And so, just connecting in with your club, and a lot of the clubs have job boards, or I know for real estate, we have this Wharton Real Estate Alumni Google group, and it's not just MBAs, it's also undergrad grads. And anytime there's a job, that, let's say like somebody at, Tishman is hiring, they'll put that job on the board, and then with a contact, right? And so right now it's busy, the board. And so, yeah, you're part of this network, and it means something. All right, let's keep going down these questions here, and then we're going to have to wrap up. Consulting and strategy, going into product marketing. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, like, companies really like consultants, right? And so again, really transferable skill sets. And so thinking about on the ground what you want to build. Media and entertainment this year, I will say, somewhat similar to travel and hospitality, was a disrupted industry this year, right? But like, I mean, Disney's open again, right? And so Comcast is busy, right? Thinking about, and so what we were telling our students this year is, maybe your dream job was to work in entertainment for a sports team, and like, last year, whatever, when there's no sports. So think about like, what would be sort of synergies to that, right? Looking at media companies of streaming services, right? Like thinking about like where the market is and approaching it from there. Okay. So the question here, I'm just reading it, of companies that reserve a plan for at least one Wharton MBA every year. It doesn't work like that. There's nothing prescriptive about it. It just is these companies come to campus each year. Either we send out our recruiting calendar, we build it out in the summer, and then when students get to campus in preterm, the recruiting process opens up, and in the first semester, when you get access to all of the companies who will be recruiting on campus, all of the companies who are engaging with students, and going from there. So there's nothing sort of like prescriptive about like, if I'm American Express, I commit to one Wharton student, but like and I keep saying American Express because they're a great partner company for us, but we have a great relationship with them. The more students we send there, the more they know Wharton talent. And it's just like a self-fulfilling sort of process, essentially. Let's see, do we help international students get visas upon graduation? And so the way that works with the CPT and the OPT, which is the curricular practical training, which you get for the summer, and then the occupational one. If you are an international student who, and look, like the visa process changes with administrations. We are hoping and looking at it opening up quite a bit right now with H-1Bs. Hopefully that'll continue that process. We talk to students a lot about using their OPT and going for a STEM major, which, a variety of majors do count as STEM majors right now, and to extend the OPT to have more shots at the H-1B, as well as we have an international student advisor. So she covers healthcare and energy, but she works really closely with international students, and she's our representative for Penn's ISSS, which is an acronym for International Student Services and Support. I think I got that right. And then as well as your academic advisor, who also is looped into this. And so again, another holistic approach to supporting students with, essentially, nuanced questions. Question on ASN connecting with Parttime or WEMBAs. We don't have a Parttime program. And no, we don't work with WEMBA students. And so that program runs completely separately, but there are advisors over there, and it's an amazing program. Let us see here. Let me just make sure I'm not seeing any repeating questions. It's because we are almost out of time. Oh, it's actually 1 o'clock. I am going to apologize that I have to hop off. I have another event here.
Yeah, Colleen, I was going to, hi everyone, it's Casey again. I wanted to, thank Colleen for her time. Colleen, I know you have to run, so I wanted to thank you. This is amazing. I yet again learn things from you every single time, so can't say enough good. I wanted to remind everyone, as Colleen spoke about, she and her team are incredibly busy. So what I'm going to do is put a website for our admissions fellows in the chat. I would highly recommend that if you have specific questions about career management or looking for jobs or recruiting, you reach out to our admissions fellows, because the career management team is the best in the business and busy 24 hours a day. So when you become a student and matriculate and come here, they will be at your service. But until then, our admissions fellows are amazing. So I'm putting that in the chat right now. Want to again thank Colleen for her time. Thank you everyone for the amazing questions and being so attentive and really having interest in the Wharton program. If you have questions beyond this, you can definitely email our admissions fellows or our inbox. But Colleen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Casey. And again, thanks for all the great questions. You guys are thinking about the things you should be thinking about, and we look forward to receiving all of your applications in the next few cycles.